everybody. Welcome to another Future of Work podcast brought to you by SmartSearch. I'm Bill Inman. I'm your host again today, and I'm very excited to be here with an HR tech legend, somebody I respect immensely, who I've been following for decades. And I don't want to age us, but people probably already know just by the gray in both of our beards, that we're not 20. So John Sumser, thank you so much for joining me here today. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you.
Thanks, Bill. And I don't know, I cut my gray hair when I was 8, so I figure I'm about 30 now.
Okay, then that's what people should believe. Same here.
Yeah, we're in the Metaverse now. So,
well, in the Metaverse, we could be anybody. We had a pre-conversation before this call and talked about a lot of interesting things that, John, I'm fascinated to follow up with you on after this call. I believe that we met decades ago, but I'm thrilled to be having this conversation with you now about the future of almost everything, right? But a big future in the human capital talent industry, which is artificial intelligence and the ethics and the risk around that we'll be discussing today. And it's a topic that you've been thinking about for a long time, right?
That's right. That's right. It has become a central focus of mine, actually.
And rightfully so. I think we're going to learn a lot of stuff today. But a little bit about your background, and if you don't mind, you can enlighten us. As the co-founder and principal analyst at HR Examiner, you've taken all this knowledge that you've learned over the decades in the HR tech industry. You've been around. We had a conversation before we started this recording about the Netscape browser and the Mosaic browser. So you go all the way back to then, and you've been analyzing talent from that point, which was the late 80s, early 90s. And you really have always pushed throughout your career for bigger thinking in the human capital staffing HR tech industry, right?
Right. That's exactly right. So HR Examiner is the place where I publish my work. And basically what I do is watch the trends in the industry and try to see where the puck is going. I'm way more interested in where the puck is going than where it is right now. And so I try to figure out what the next big issues are and start to tackle them early so there's something to work with. And I've been doing that. I did it for years at a company called InterBizNet, and I moved over out of the recruiting industry and into HR tech as a whole with HR Examiner.
Yeah, I remember InterBizNet. Lots of good stuff there. So we're gonna talk. Our topic, as we mentioned, is artificial intelligence today, and we're gonna talk a little bit about the risk and the ethics around that. So if you don't mind, these interviews are normally about 15 to 20 minutes if we can keep it as such. And although we could probably have a Harry Potter type series around this because AI is so interesting. So what is AI, John, to you, and why should people care?
Well, so that's really interesting. AI is, there's an academic definition and then there's a real world definition. The academic definition is about specific techniques used to make forecast predictions and consume data and find patterns in data. The commercial definition is more like anything that has sort of a predictive capacity to it is something that you may as well treat as AI, whether or not it meets the academic definition. So when something forecasts your behavior or something forecasts an answer to a solution or something tells you how many candidates you need in the pipeline to make the hire, those are all examples of what I would think of as commercial AI.
Right. That's really interesting. So, and AI is continually evolving and obviously being used for a lot of different scenarios. So why is it important? So you've told us a little about what it is. Why is it important now in our industry?
Well, what's happening is because computing power has grown so enormously, we're able to manufacture and corral data about almost anything. And what AI is primarily is a way of taking the data that we can create now and turning it into insight and actionable information. And so what's important about it is that this approach, which is that the machine is going to weigh in with an opinion on anything that you've got, is here to stay. And we need to learn how to manage it. And you don't manage it by letting the machine just do whatever it wants to do. You manage it by realizing that the machine has an opinion that's as flawed as yours, and that what you want to do is what you do with any opinion. You get several of them, and then you arrive at a decision. You never, ever, ever turn all of the decisions over to a single decision maker.
Yeah, and maybe over time, as with we might see with AI, you might have a trusted advisor who's led you to the right path over time, and you could trust something. But that's a good point. It helps to provide insights and so forth. So I think it's important in what you just said. This is an opinion, but also AI is not at artificial general intelligence yet, where AI is human level intelligence, or artificial super intelligence, where AI is smarter than all the humans on the planet. AI is in artificial narrow intelligence. It's really used for very specific applications. But what people forget, I think, is that AI is really built by humans, right? The algorithms come from human perception analysis. They build them. Tell us more about how AI is built and the models around that.
Well, so the way that a model is built is a bunch of data scientists look at the data that's already available. It's a big difference between AI and the way that science has been done to date is AI starts with data rather than starting with a hypothesis. And so the data scientists look at all the data and they start to imagine what the data might be able to give them as an inference. Over time, the way that contemporary AI works is you've got these tools that examine a great big pile of data. They look for patterns. They present the patterns to data scientists, and the data scientists sort of make the funnel tighter and tighter around a specific question. And the good news is you can really derive a lot of insight out of that. The bad news is because there was no original hypothesis, all of the data that's being used is recycled, and there are no real standards for the quality of data that goes into the data crunching process. So you get all kinds of weirdness around the edges of AI. The answers are not as good as they appear to be at first.
Yeah, through machine learning, and of course, the strength of AI is pattern recognition, being able to take in ingest data from big data from multiple sources that humans just can't process on their own. So there's been a lot of value in understanding patterns. However, the individuals who interpret this, the programmers who create the algorithms can also be biased. And there's a big calling lately for XAI, or explainable AI, to understand what is the algorithm that's developing these patterns. Could it be biased? Could it not be biased? In our industry, that's important, right? In the talent industry and human capital, because we're in an era now where bias is not only not tolerated, it shouldn't be tolerated. We need to give people equal opportunity. So this is like one big area. Like these AI systems can be biased. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what these systems can and can't do, based upon the fact that just that one thing could be an issue?
Well, let me back up a step and say there are two primary ways that bias enters into AI. The first way is in the describing of the problem. When you describe a problem, you impose a bias on the problem. And that bias runs the entire life of you trying to solve the problem, even if you didn't get the problem definition right, which is often the case. The second place where bias is introduced into AI functions is something that's related to diversity. So when teams do not have enough shared lived experience to imagine all of the possible implications of their work, you get things like facial recognition systems that categorize some kinds of people as lower status mammals rather than human beings. You get this weird stuff because that particular thing happened because there were no Black people on the design team. And so part of where bias comes from is everybody's got their experience, but it's narrow. And when you have a design team that's going to go work on something in AI, you've got to find a way to expand its experience base till it's as close to universal as possible.
Yeah, diversity is very important in development of these algorithms, and then making it explainable so people understand how they were developed and what they do. is super important. Well,
So I'm not sure. I'm not sure you can get to explainable AI. I wonder a lot about that, because if you think about machine learning, what machine learning does is it goes and finds patterns, and it doesn't report back about what patterns it found. It just says, I found patterns and it looks like this. And if it's taking spurious information to make the correlations, it's not even auditable, right? You don't know. The people who build it don't know how it works often. And so explainable AI is a pipe dream with current technology.
That is very true. You know, there was some people who are listening may have heard of the story where two Google AIs were talking to each other. And over a series of days, they started to develop their own language, and then they had to pull the plug on it literally because they didn't know, the Google engineers didn't know what was going on. So to that level, it's really hard to understand what's happening in AI once, especially in machine learning, especially as you impose neural nets, which have different layers of understanding to really understand what's going on. It's a really good point. So
Well,
how are we going to, go ahead, please.
Yeah, well, and the other thing is that much of the work in AI that's commercialized today is done by people who assemble open source modules of AI like Lego blocks, and they don't have any idea what's going on inside of the Lego. The assemblers don't have any idea what's going on in the tool. So it can be pretty hairy because there isn't a great deal of accountability in the design process currently.
It's very true. And so in order to get to human level intelligence, or AGI, artificial general intelligence, it's going to be the cohesiveness of bringing together an ecosystem of AI algorithms and agents to work together. So it's going to be hard to tell as you piecemeal AIs together, which come up with new insights like what's really going on. So it's a bit dangerous, I guess. We always have to check ourselves and understand that AI at present isn't the end all be all that people think it is, or it's sold, right? Because there's a lot of marketing speak. In our industry, almost especially, there's a lot of marketing talk around AI. And even when it's just used for simple ontologies to basically classify based upon, NLP, for example, reading and learning from text and so forth. AI is a little bit overblown in our industry a little bit, do you think? I mean, from a marketing perspective.
Often it's a solution looking for a problem. And so AI is a sexy thing to say that you have, but if you think about recruiting in specific, recruiting is so screwed up that the only thing that matters in any recruiting system I've ever seen is speed. And so most of the quote AI that's involved in recruiting is involved in making things go faster. But what that means is we're doing the same stupid crap faster. It doesn't mean that we're figuring out anything in particular, because people are taking the data they have and putting it into machine learning and looking for speed as an output, when the real question is quality and the real question is performance on the job and predicting that after the hire, and nobody's doing that particularly well right now. So
can we use AI to predict how people would do on the job truly to make the right decision?
Yeah, but it takes some research. This is not a slap some Lego blocks together problem. This is a high-end actual research and development problem, because you have to understand what work is, and you have to understand how organizations work, and you have to be able to tell the difference between different kinds of organizations so that you can see if Bill or John will fit well in this next organization, and is that a good thing or a bad thing? But it's possible. It's possible. You just have to collect some more data.
Can we do that though? That's one of the problems, that there's no true data consortium inside of our industry, because what you really need, where did somebody originate in the hire and how did they do on the job? And connecting that HRIS system to the front end, even job board, that doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, but that's an old problem. That problem isn't going to be with us. The talent intelligence community are taking databases of 500 million or a billion people and figuring out everything there is to know about those people. And that's how advanced companies are doing their hiring. And once you have a pretty good database of all different kinds of people, then you can start doing deep skills assessments, and you can start seeing how this set of skills fits in that set of jobs and what works and what doesn't work, and start giving feedback about the quality of the job description. Because Bill took the job and only lasted 90 days because the job description was wrong.
Right.
Right. And you'll start to be able, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. Let's finish your thought. I'm sorry, John.
Yeah, that's okay. You'll be able to tell, because you'll be able to tell as a job hunter, you'll be able to tell who you're going to work for before the job ad is posted.
And that was interesting. We talked about that before the call, and preempting somebody even looking for a job or knowing exactly when they're available in an Uber-esque type manner, right? So they can be put on a project at the right place, right time. What are the key variables? How do we do that, John? How do we get there? How do we close that gap? And that's like a danger to the recruiting industry, because it seemingly takes recruiters out of it.
Well, before the last 20 years, recruiting was about making people judgments, and recruiters were held accountable for whether or not their hires worked out. Today, recruiting is transactional, and people are not held accountable for how their hires work out. We'll go back to the time when people were held accountable. So the corporate recruiting industry, most corporate recruiters don't last longer than a couple of years, and they never pick up the skills that you would pick up if you made personnel judgments in an accountable system for 10 years or say, right? So you've made your 10,000 decisions, and you're playing like a pro now. And in order to make the AI systems that are coming work, you're going to have people like that. So the industry will evolve towards having people who are better at making the fit happen. And as the people get more skilled at making the fit happen, we'll be able to learn from them and teach the machines to do it. But it takes a while.
It's an interesting point, right? My mom was in recruiting. It's one of the reasons I'm in this industry to begin with. So I blame her. But she was at Disney for a good 10 years. So she got to see and watch the people she hired grow into good hires, good managers. And you know what? She's still friends with a lot of those people that she hired. It always amazed me. She built a friendship with them. By leaving a job as a corporate recruiter, or even using tools to do the job, you lose that layer of wisdom, which is the people part of it. Who worked out and why did they work out, which helps you make decisions in the future. So I think you're exactly right about that we're going to need to infuse that level of wisdom of the butterfly effect of hiring somebody and how it works out for the whole organization. And we're going to lose that, aren't we, somewhere in the process?
We've already lost it. We're going to get it back. We're going to get it back, because transactional recruiting that has everything to do with speed and nothing to do with quality is breaking companies right now. It's not widely understood, but as we speed it up and automate it, people will start to understand that it's the quality of the decision that matters, not the speed of the decision.
Yeah, the Great Resignation, right? If people love their jobs and it was their passion, why would they leave? We're seeing more people leave their jobs now than ever before. And you couple that with the stat that I threw out there earlier before we talked in recording on this call was 80 million people are essentially going to have to find new careers by 2025 because of AI automation, and expected up to 800 million by 2030, 1/10 of the population of the world. And and I mentioned this quote as well earlier, AI is supposed to take humans out of dehumanizing jobs. For example, McDonald's is now automating their drive-through window with AI to basically speak to people and take the orders and take people out of those jobs. And hopefully those people can find something that they're passionate about and they love. So we're on this slippery slope of hopefully AI can bring us back to the point that you talked about, which is finding the right person for the right job at the right time, which is hopefully their passion. But also we're displacing a lot of workers, and there's ethics around both areas, right? So finding the quality person at the right time, and then AI taking jobs. What are your thoughts on both those areas from an ethical standpoint?
Well, so I'm not sure that AI is going to do what you said. I don't think that that's how technology actually works. what is going to happen, there are a lot of people working in Amazon warehouses who used to work in retail and hospitality.
Right.
Right. And so people are going to shift where they work. But AI is going to make more jobs than we lose. And so there's a prime example, right? Why aren't the people in retail? Because the recommendations on Amazon are better than the recommendation engines in brick and mortar stores. And so they come out of the local mom and pop retail store and go to work in the Amazon factory. That kind of shift from one industry to another is what we're actually going to see. And what you notice right now in the middle of that transition is there's a serious labor shortage going on. Right. And that doesn't sound like 80 million people losing their jobs and wandering around collecting welfare checks. That sounds like 80 million people doing better in different things that are more exciting than they were in the other place. So I think it'd be interesting to see how that shakes out. The ethical problems with AI, to come back to your question, are hard to solve. There's a woman named Timnit Gebru who was an ethics researcher at Google and was fired for discovering that Google's big language models are biased and radically biased. And so she just this week launched an organization on the basis that the only way you can have ethical AI is if you have oversight from independent external organizations. I don't think that's true. I think that in order to have ethical AI, you need external input because nobody can afford to have a perfect design team. Mm-hmm. But the actual practice of ethics in the organization is going to be much more like total quality was in the 80s. We're going to teach everybody how to think about ethics and embed ethics in their work. And that's right in line with the things that you're excited about. Decentralization and blockchain depend on organizations where it's okay to tell the truth, where the name of the game is something like Kaizen, where we're all working together to improve stuff. And the way that we work together to improve stuff is when we see a flaw, we point it out. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's not the way business works currently. And the way the business works currently is if you point something out, you're liable to get fired like Timnit Gebru did. But we're headed towards a time where the actual survivability of businesses depend on them being able to listen to their employees and hear the truth on the ground floor. And so ethics is another way of talking about the changes that management has to make in the way that it operates its organization so that we don't get a carbon copy of what management expects, and we get a good product instead.
And that's really interesting. Thank you for that. And to come full circle, do you believe that management can leverage AI ethically to make those decisions?
Well, I think the risk is that the easiest thing to do is accelerate dehumanization. So I kind of got a chuckle out of the notion that AI takes people out of dehumanizing jobs or destroys dehumanizing jobs, when the nature of HR technology is singularly dehumanizing. The nature of HR technology is that we put a machine where a human is supposed to be, over and over and over and over and over again, and that's what sucks the life out of people. And so it will be easier for AI to dehumanize than for it to not dehumanize, and you need a kind of a loyal resistance that says, hang on, if we're going to get the most out of the people who are working in our company, we can't afford to treat them like objects. But what machine learning does exactly is treats people like objects. And so there's got to be a countervailing force. And I think of that as ethics. It could easily be thought of as safety. It's the idea that AI shouldn't do harm. And we need to be better at that than Google was when they decided that they would do no evil. They didn't seem to be really able to pull that off. But with AI, we need to care enough about it so that it doesn't make things worse.
Absolutely. As an advisor to a decentralized AI company where benevolent AI is the mantra, it's very important to have some controls on that. And I think we just found like what you're most I think what you said is really compelling. The industry that you've been in this entire time, monitoring HR tech, you just called it dehumanizing. And it actually is so true, because we put things as simple as career sites in between a person and a person. And then you get the black hole, the resume black hole we've all, just for example, makes it a very unhuman selection process. And I hope that with AI in our industry, we're able to find that again. I think that was really astute of you to mention. That's the goal here, isn't it? To make things more human, to make better decisions with ethics. So that's really fascinating. Where can people find you, John? How can people learn more and stay in touch with you?
Well, I'm all over the place, but if you look for hrexaminer.com, there's generally something interesting there. I am at John Sumser on Twitter, and I have big opinions about all sorts of stuff, and so it's not hard to run across them if you're looking.
Yeah, I'd love to have more conversations with you. I'm sure that we'll have differing opinions on certain things, and
I'm sure we will. I was hoping to get there today, but we'll get there.
Yeah, well, AI, I think you and I are in pretty much alignment. I think blockchain would be another conversation where we'd have different opinions, which I love. We should have that debate.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah. Well, everybody, thank you so much for watching. And we have such great, at SmartSearch here, we have such great guests on this Future of Work podcast. John is somebody, for those of you that know him, you already know he is epic in the industry and continues to be so, lifelong learner, as we talked about beforehand. And we'll have more of these interviews. Hopefully we'll have that blockchain debate, which I think it's going to turn out to be in the near future. So John, thank you again for being here with me today. And we look forward to talking to you
Bill.
again.
This was a blast. Thanks very much.
Absolutely. Take care, everybody. Thanks for watching.
All righty. Bye-bye.